This episode is brought to you by Betone Fitness Wayland. Hello and welcome to Women of Wayland podcast season 4 episode 2. We are introducing a new story category on the Women of Wayland podcast called Wayland Trailblazers. In this special category, we shine a spotlight on the trailblazers in Wayland. Join us as we explore the untold stories of those who dare to defy norms, challenge conventions, and lead the way towards a better future. A Wayland Trailblazer, what does it mean? It refers to someone who leads the way or pioneers innovative solutions, particularly within the Wayland community. When I was looking for a guest in this particular category, I didn't have to look far. You often ask me how I discover these stories and the remarkable women behind them. The answer is quite simple. Either you connect me with them or I happen to cross paths with them locally. In the case of meeting Karen Kelly, our guest today, both of these scenarios came into play. It was 5 years ago when I first met Karen as I was launching this podcast, scrambling to find necessary equipment. I didn't know Karen personally, but I mustered up the courage to ask her for a tripod after spotting her with a camera at a local event. To my delight, she happily obliged. Now, you might be wondering what Karen's tripod has to do with her introduction here. Well, let me clarify. While I could easily list Karen's impressive credentials and professional achievements, such as her extensive experience working with numerous brands and entrepreneurs or her pioneering work in innovative treatments for adults at 2 major hospitals, that would merely scratch the surface of her journey. From her time in the C-suite to advising startups, from building her own company to working with renowned brands, Karen has navigated diverse paths. Today, however, I want to focus on what makes her a Wayland Trailblazer. Beyond the surface, there are profound financial and mental health benefits in providing a safe and nurturing environment for our children after school. On September 11, 2023, a groundbreaking after-school program called RecPASS was launched. Karen co-founded Parents for After-School Solutions, RecPASS, a grassroots movement aimed at addressing this after-school crisis in Wayland. Through the collective efforts of a 7-member committee, RecPASS successfully partnered with the YMCA to establish a Wayland-based after-school program. In this episode, therefore, we speak about a lot of things RecPASS, initial journey, struggles, all of it. We also get into Karen's next trailblazing journey. So stay with us and let's welcome Karen Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me, Yamini.
Karen, I cannot tell you how much I am in awe of all the things that you do. There's a saying. They say,
I know the phrase also. Yeah, it's
jack of all
trades, master of none.
Yeah. The phrase, we remember the phrase. That is so true for you. You are a jack of all trades, and it's not like you're not a master of one. I think you've been leaping, jumping, and successfully driving so many things in so many arenas. So before we start on your story, my first question is to take you to this Wayland Trailblazer category. You are our first guest in this category, and I cannot be more happy. Thank you for doing this for Wayland. And before audiences perplexed about what is happening in Wayland, I just want to give them a background. Would you tell me the background as to how RecPASS, Parents for After School Solutions, came into being?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. You have been so successful at doing this over the course of 4 seasons now. And I think the entire community is incredibly happy that you're doing it. And I appreciate what you're doing for women. So thank you. Yes, Parents for After School Solutions. So I have always been a person focused on my career. And, for better or worse, this was a high priority for me. I put off having kids for 8 years because I was really focused on getting one of my businesses off the ground. Once I got it there and I felt comfortable it would survive through a maternity leave, I had my son, which was the best decision I ever made.
And that was when? And I know that we both have boys of the same
age.
Right.
That was 2015. So, in terms of my priorities, I've always been a working person. It's what I like to do. So Wayland has had this kind of bubbling problem, right? It's sort of like a geyser that becomes inactive at some times and gets worse at other times. And during the pandemic, I think a lot of, my son was just kind of coming into kindergarten then, and a lot of the after school issues and the lack of capacity. It hadn't really reached sort of like this crescendo yet. And so after the pandemic, when everybody kind of came out and said, okay, like, people were kind of going back to work, even if it was work from home. Kids are going back into schools and, people needed after school care. By the way, parents were so burnt out. They were so burnt out from the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And all the things, particularly moms. Like, let's face it, most of the cracks in the wheels fell on the moms because they always do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many reasons for that, and we can talk about it. But, it's not to blame anyone. It's just where society is right now. And so, everyone wanted after school care, which makes perfect sense at a time when it was never harder to hire bus drivers. It was never harder to hire hourly workers across categories. So, it sort of was this perfect storm of lack of capacity meets high demand. So I kept, we had a nanny prior to Wyatt going to kindergarten. I kept her on during kindergarten, paid a $50,000 employee for an additional year because our district couldn't provide him with a spot. I sort of told myself, look, I'm sure it'll get better next year. She's aware, they're aware of the problem. We'll work through it. And then it really was so that the school year started. And it really was kind of that fall where we reached out and said, hey, to the district, what are your plans for expanding next year? What do you anticipate? Because, there were actually no new spots given this year. And the answer we kind of got back was, we really don't anticipate any change.
I know that we're talking about the problem right now.
Yeah.
I just want to take you back to, was it when it was personal for you, that's when the idea of fixing it came? Or was it, all the way there and subconsciously running into your mind, and then you were like, no, this is happening, and this is also happening with me, and I need to do something about it?
It happened when it became personal for me, because once I realized that there was nowhere else to turn, and that many moms, parents were dealing with this issue silently in their homes. And I quit my job, Yamini. I'm not sure if you know that, but I ended up quitting my job as the president of a company because I didn't have after school care, and I refused to keep a $50,000 employee for a second year. So that's where it really became personal for me. I had to make a choice, my family or my job, because I wasn't going to shuffle my kid in front of screens for 3 hours a day.
Yeah. What do you do?
All right. So that's when I sort of said, okay, I'm going to take a breath, and then I'm going to go solve this problem.
Oh my God. Great. Karen, I just want to tell you, because I was observing this problem since I landed in Wayland. And I came in 2016. That's when my kid was born. And I had to take a back seat, did not go back to full-time job. And I was like, I didn't even know, because it was my second year in States. I was in Canada before, and in India, and grad school in Germany. I was always working everywhere I was. So we share that. And in 2016, when my kid was born, I had the same thing. The system does not support moms. And if I'm paying that much to a nanny, I'm like, what am I even saving out of what I'm going to
Honestly.
earn?
And, Amanda, who was my, co-pilot on this, she is a single mom, and, she's a social worker, right? So,
Right.
I mean, it's such a noble profession, but it's not
I
an
know.
incredibly high-paying profession. So, when she was doing the math and she shares this story publicly, she's like, I'm making $5 an hour.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So the math doesn't work.
Yeah,
And Massachusetts does have the highest. We are the third highest county. The county that Wayland is in is the third highest cost for childcare in the country. Our county is the third highest in the country. So we feel the squeeze more, proportionately than most of the country.
So before going to the district, did you turn to other towns for a role model for what they were doing? Did you find this problem systemic everywhere?
Yes. Now, the degree to which the problem existed was different. Some towns were similar. Some towns were better. We didn't find any town that was quite as bad. However, So what we did was
Why were they better? Sorry.
because they had found a way to plug in, say, third-party vendors to run a larger program in the school. So they
Ah.
could just they found resources to do it. Or some of the districts nearby we also found had formed like a nonprofit with a board of parents and then partnered with a third party to push in and run the programs offsite. So we saw when we researched we probably researched 12 different towns all in Metro West Massachusetts. And what we found was there was a smorgasbord of sort of cobbling together of means by which folks were being provided with after school care, but that across the board there were voices saying, hey, we need that weren't being fulfilled.
Yeah, they say when you empower women, you empower the society. And when I was looking into your LinkedIn post, you shared this wonderful stats about what can happen when the after school care will be provided. Can you tell us a little bit what are the joyful positive stuff that can happen actually? Because I was amazed by those pointers.
Yep. I think to be honest with you, this was part of, I mean, at least 50% of the benefit for me personally of doing the work was understanding the data about the mental health impacts
Mhm.
for the
Oh,
families who were involved. So 88% of parents reported a good or tremendous amount of anxiety relief by getting after school care. 79% reported feeling less stressed on a daily basis. 45 reported feeling happier throughout the day. I mean,
wow.
how many things in this world can we change and get this kind of
Result.
impact?
Wow, yeah.
So it's much bigger than just after school care. And, I think too, the common thread for me as I pulled this apart and just even looking at my own story, but realizing that it applies to thousands, is that taking care of children, right, means taking care of parents, means taking care of the workforce, right? It's all interconnected, right? Which means taking care of profitability in the economy, right? Take it all the way up.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely, and that's the area some of the countries are actually taking leap on, and in our country, this article I can share it on the show notes. It spoke about school in Durham, North Carolina, and the stats were like something like not even quarter of the percentage of students get after school care. 25 million kids will join it if it was provided in
yes,
the school. That number is big,
it's massive.
and the number that enters into that after school care is so low. When you saw that, did you approach this single-mindedly, or you tried finding doing some research and finding women or in your team? And I know about Amanda, but can you elaborate on what were your initial step and then take us through the journey to talking to the district?
Yes. So the first thing I did was try and actually build some allies in the schools. So I started meeting with some principals, and some of them really had no idea this was even an issue, which
Wow,
is an issue
see,
in and of itself. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
So okay, so we've got to increase awareness and create some allies internally. But then I sat in on the incoming kindergarten call. And I knew that after school would be addressed and parents would ask. And sure enough, it was the only thing parents were asking about. And, there are, I mean, I took screenshots because I was like, wow, I want to remember this. I mean, threads and threads and threads in this 1 hour meeting saying, will there be more after school spots? What are you doing? Can you tell us more about like how you're addressing this? And for the most part, it kind of went unanswered. And so at that moment I said, okay, people are aware. There's clearly not going to be any kind of, meaningful change come the following fall. So I shut my computer. I went on Facebook. I went into the community forum and I just said, if you were just sitting on that incoming kindergarten call and you need after school care, please send me an email. We're going to fix this.
Wow.
So, and I mean, that night alone, I probably got 75 email addresses. I mean, it's just, that's how you know when there's a problem that
Yeah,
needs to be solved. People jump, right? So, like any other
100%.
industry. So from there, people started emailing me, hey, want to get involved. There was so much positive energy, honestly. And, I think that's also really important, staying positive throughout. So at that point I said, okay, let's form a committee. Asked 6 or 7 folks who had been emailing me and who had been expressed interest. So we formed a committee 7. That was the PASS committee. Amanda was one of those people. Amanda and I had known each other for years from the Wayland Children and Parents Association, and we had talked about it intermittently, right? And, she started texting me and was like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I was like, what do you think about jumping on the committee with me and we'll go get this together?
Yeah.
So that's what
How
happened.
wonderful.
Yeah. Then after that, it was more about dividing and conquering what needed to get done. We needed to, get more people in the Facebook group, like start a Facebook group, get people in it. We needed to do comps on neighboring districts. The committee all did that. We needed to do comps on.
So it's just you and Amanda in the committee?
Correct.
Okay.
7 total. And then we needed to find out, well, who are some of the other vendors we can contact? Lots of research up front. This is a daunting task. You can't do this by yourself or even with 2 people. You need a lot of hands on deck.
People,
yeah.
Yes.
So it was almost like building a team, figuring out also like these are all working parents, right? We're not getting paid for this. So what is everybody's bandwidth? What is everybody's interest and strength? And trying to leverage that as well.
And that very well because you have been in a startup, you've advised a startup. Tell me, how did your background actually help you do all of this easily? Because I know it did.
I am very good at turning nothing into something. I've just done it my whole life, and I'm not afraid of the creation process.
I love that.
And so for me, it was a natural thing. And when I dig in on something, I really do dig in. There's no half measures. So yeah, I just knew. You also know. Look, everybody's doing their best at the school level, right? The schools are understaffed. Everybody's stretched. I totally understand that, which is why the very first thing I did was reach out to the folks running base and say, hey, I want to come meet with you. Listen, I quit my job. I can be a pretty good assistant. What can I do to help? And so I went and I sat down with them. I brought flowers. I said, look, I just consider me like an assistant. What can I do? So I had empathy. I still do have empathy for all they have to deal with. It required a motivated person to grease the wheels and...
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a break and talk about our episode sponsor. Suzanne is the owner and instructor behind Betone Fitness Wayland. As a former Division 1 athlete, fitness has always been a huge part of Suzanne's life. She discovered Betone in 2013 after having twins and was eager to find a new, efficient, and effective form of fitness. Betone hit the spot. The Betone method utilizes custom-built reformer-like machines that delivers challenging, completely adjustable resistance and options to support all body types and ability levels. The 45-minute fitness classes are based on engaging the whole body. The workout is full body, core-centric, no impact, and endlessly engaging experience. Suzanne loves a good challenge. With her love of upbeat and fun music, Suzanne's classes are energizing, challenging, and lively. Get ready to get toned and have a blast. Check out Betone Fitness Wayland. They even offer childcare during certain classes. All the details will be on our show notes. Was there a time when you were like, okay, F the world, I'm going to fix this?
Every day. But I will tell you this. There are definitely moments where twice I walked out of the town building and just started crying because I felt, we just weren't being heard. And there was in my mind, I was like, why aren't they trying to help? I couldn't really understand. But, I do also understand that, politics are politics and things are the way they are. But those were the toughest moments, I think, for me. There were, a couple things that we came up with, ideas that we came up with to fix some of the issues that were turned down, and for reasons that we could have probably gotten around. But, again, it's like, okay. And again, this is why having a team matters. If I had been by myself, doing this.
You needed that. Thank you for sharing it with the audience because, something like this would not have been solved if you had not been turned down as well. That's kind of a motivation too. Can you tell us of the local resources that actually came in handy in solving these?
Yes. So I would say, number one, where we ended up pitching the after-school program at the YMCA Camp Chickamee, because we looked around. We don't have a boys and girls club here, right? We don't have many family resources in Wayland.
Yeah.
But we looked at that site and we knew that they had just built a new all-weather building. And when you looked online, we sort of realized, oh, wow, they actually have all these fundraising plans. They want to build more, but this is just sitting empty September to June. So putting together that pitch deck, identifying them as like, this is a resource that we need to build on because they're clearly wanting to build it out. And there's a perfect partnership and a marriage of needs here. They need finances to build and we need after school care.
So YMCA and
Correct. So Camp Chickabee is run by YMCA, the
okay, wow.
YMCA.
Yeah, I've been hearing that name every time we have a Hunger Games style summer camps. Is the fight going on
Yep.
in that town? Tell me, for the audience, because I'm sure the audience would like to know, what is this Hunger Games? Was it like that? Like people had to sit on their laptops and reserve the spots and fight with each other to get that spot?
I think RecPASS, when RecPASS launched, it was. And we are limited by space at the town building. So that is the problem. And that is why RecPASS can't expand further right now. However, the COACC, which is getting built, which should be, I don't know, year and a half from now, the
Can you tell us what is COA?
Yes, the Council on Aging Community Center. So it's going to be a beautiful space right over by the local. And the idea is that this is a community space and that it will be in part used for senior programming, but that, the way it was sold to the town, half of it is recreation. So they have said that we will, through conversations with them and kind of, again, bringing that data forward of like, here's the need and it's a community resource. They have said that we will have several hours a day over there.
That's
the rec
amazing.
department. It's going to be good. So there is absolutely plans to expand RecPASS. It will get bigger. Right now we're limited. But back to your question about the Hunger Games. Camp Chickabee, it was only 5 days a week. And now this is something interesting that came up because we had to run surveys early on. We had to kind of get as many people as we could into the email database and then start to understand, well, what are we solving for here? What do people actually need? And it turns out 50% of families said we only need like 3 or 2 days a week.
Oh, wow.
Right. So we don't need.
So, yeah.
This is a big deal. They also said we'd be really happy if you just get us to 4:30. We don't need till 5:30 or 6.
Really?
Yes. Not everyone, but like half.
Yeah, half.
That makes a big difference. Yeah. And, that question wasn't being asked by the district, right? But wow, this actually becomes a much more solvable problem when you break it down at that level. So I think for Chickabee, it was set up in such a way that it was only for the folks who needed 5 days a week. And they run till 6 p.m.
Nice.
So it's like a very full coverage. So it wasn't for everyone. So it didn't fill up quite as fast as RecPASS, but I think within 48 hours it was full.
Karen, this is incredible. And also the fact that you're using all your marketing expertise and technology expertise in getting people to tell us the right things, what's going on in their mind and how much they need it. And this is a data that is important even for the future.
100%.
Because I was reading this article and it said that a lot of people were not using the aftercare also because it was expensive. So tell me the pricing here.
Yeah. So the pricing for Camp Chickabee is actually very comparable to base, which is about $8,000 a year. I think Chickamee's maybe $9,000, but it's really comparable. So, and from my perspective, I mean, I can tell you that what they pay the base workers, and it's very low on the scale of things, which is part of the problem. But to me, that's affordable childcare for an entire year. I have somebody to watch my child from 2:30 to 6 p.m. should I want it. By the way, they also cover the early Wednesday release, the Super Tuesday releases.
Yeah.
It's
oh my God.
hugely important. I don't even have to keep track of it anymore.
Yeah,
It's just like wildly liberating. But so to me, that's perfectly affordable.
I read that educators have so much to do. I understand. They have a lot on their plate.
Yes.
And when they're in the school, they have so many things to organize, compile, and, but why did they not see this problem or raise awareness about it? Because as you said, the base workers were also not being paid so much. So if they had to do something, they had to fix this problem, why were they not looking at it?
That is a very good question, Yamini.
Thank you.
The first answer I'll give you is that there were people who identify, if you really look at, okay, well, what caused this acute issue in 2023? it was, we switched start times with the high school back in 20. And that happened across the country in, I don't know what the proportion is, but I don't know. My guess is 30 to 40% of districts, because that was the year all the data came out that said high schoolers' brains don't wake up until 10 a.m., et cetera, right? So in an effort to kind of accommodate their optimal learning times,
elementary and middle school took a hit.
Now, there was a large committee in Wayland who were all looking at this and kind of collaborating on should we or shouldn't we, one of which was the head of our recreation department, Catherine Brenna, who, as we all know,
huge shout out to her.
Huge shout out.
Yeah.
Huge shout out. Another female hero in Wayland. But she said at the time, I told them this was going to create two problems. Number one, you're going to have a childcare problem. And number two, you're going to have high schoolers playing soccer in the dark at 7:30 at night. And she used to run a YMCA. She's an expert, right? And so she felt frustrated because she's like, I tried to bring this up. Ultimately, I think a lot of these districts just didn't plan appropriately. Why? I can't really answer that question, but for whatever reason, the weight was placed on making this change for high schoolers. And it's almost like they started but then didn't finish, right? They didn't finish the accommodations. So that's reason number one. But reason number two I can speak to in Wayland, it wasn't being raised by the folks running base. There were no alarms going off. So individual parents would email and say, hey, what's happening? Hey, what's going on? Hey. But it just, for whatever reason, wasn't being put in front of the superintendent or whomever. Now, we also have had a lot of challenges in Wayland over the last few years with leadership, right? So trying to get big things like this done in the times we've had would have been challenging.
Yeah.
So and that's true. And at times I wonder, we have been able to get this done if we had really firm leadership in place? Because I actually think part of our advantage was that we didn't have to go through as many approvals.
That is so cool. Yes.
Right.
Speaks volumes about what we have right now in the town.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time aftercare is done, they will all be so exhausted. I mean, we all want them to be exhausted. As moms, we want them. Okay. My question to that is, did you find parents and I'm not coming from a gender perspective. I am actually coming from a gender perspective. Was it just moms who were more, approaching you, or was it like parents together, or you were surprised with men coming forward and telling you that, we need to fix this. This is not working. Single dads. There are single dads in our town.
Sure. It was mostly moms, but I will say there was a large proportion of husbands who chimed in. At one point, one of the committee members' husbands sort of would jump on our calls too, because he wanted to be involved and he wanted to hear, and contribute. So it was mostly moms.
Would you say that you would like that number to go up and dads to be more?
Yes, but so I read a really interesting piece of research the other day about, why is it that it falls on mom? And the idea is that we tend to think, we're very focused about the wage gap for women versus men. And we think about, even potentially, why aren't there more women at the top? But what the article argued was that there's data to suggest that the gender roles begin at home. And I was like, oh, yes, it's so obvious, right? But that's the truth, I think.
It does.
Right?
Still. Yeah, which is why I asked you this question, because I really want to understand if parents are, they saw this problem collectively, or was it more tough on moms than dads? The first, I don't know the stats, but I'm sure if somebody has to forfeit their job, it would be a woman, mostly in most cases. Am I
100%.
Yeah. So this aftercare program, what does it provide with to parents? What are kids doing during this time?
For RecPASS specifically?
What is a RecPASS? And
sure.
Tell us in detail about, so that people have an understanding.
Sure. So the two opportunities we created were both off-site from school. We, number one, got the partnership established with the YMCA to run the 5-day-a-week till 6 p.m. program for K-5 students at Camp Chickamee. So that's one. And then the other, which is pretty different, and I think it's good, the variation here. So the other is RecPASS. This is the new after-school program that the rec department started They already had program going there, but essentially what they did was renovate the entire thing and really kind of put some more juice into it through this partnership.
And
So
they were doing in which location? What was
at the
it?
town building.
Okay.
Yeah. So they
So
can,
it's divided between the two, or like,
they're two totally separate programs.
and the kids are going on in both the programs? Like, what is the total number of kids right now who are availing this?
So the total number of kids is something like 200.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
We still need to do more, but we're getting close.
But the responsibility, like the burden falls on both the side, like the town building and the YMCA, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
and like they are totally separate programs.
Yes.
We were able to, through a lot of coaxing, get a bus funded by essentially we baked in the cost into RecPASS, but get an additional bus, amend our current bus contract, and get additional bus to bring the kids from the schools over to the town building. So like that kind of adjustment, this is not rocket science.
Yeah.
It just, again, it took like grease in the wheel and somebody who was determined to kind of make it happen and, navigate the politics. So, and that's where we had to go to the town because believe it or not, our town controls the bus contract.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, which is why then we needed to establish a relationship with the select board and appear in front of them and meet with the town manager and dig out the numbers. And, there's only so much that's in your control. But at the end of the day, it's like what you said before is correct. Using my sales experience was critical because at the end of every meeting, it was like, okay, well, when are we meeting again? Let's get a date on the calendar right now. I need to go report to the 400 parents who are waiting to hear how this meeting went.
Good job on that. Yes.
So, but that's also why it's so important to organize at the beginning.
And now that you
Without
tell me
that-
about the bus contract, I remember all those bus standing in the back of those parking lots, like, and me and my kiddo will count them, like, how many buses? Oh, that is why.
So
Incredible. Okay.
So it's great. And then again, we maintain from the start, this is not going to cost the town or the school any money.
Yeah. Wow. So you guys fixed this problem, and now you have time. Did I do it right?
Joke of all.
And now you get the time. And so you, my fabulous lady, with all the time that you're like getting right now, you start bubbling with ideas and things. And I know that you're onto something big again. But before I take you there, do you have to overlook this past process right now? How does that work?
There's nothing ongoing we need to do. We did just run that survey where we understood more about the mental health data, but also to understand what are the outstanding needs from the past community. So we have passed those along to the recreation department.
So it's taken care of.
Yeah. At a certain point also, you have to know your role and you need to know when to step out. We've done our job. We've got
You fixed it.
really good professionals on it now. And also, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but the base has now opened up a few more enrichment programs also after school, like large back-to-back programs in the schools. So I think, again, just creating a little bit of – so I can see that things are continuing to kind of – the Longfellow wait list also opened up, right? Because there was all this shift in movement. Some people said, hey, I want to go to Chickamee or what have you. The base, one of the other critical pieces we learned, like I said, a lot of parents only needed 2 or 3 days, but base was mandated 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days a week. She opened it up to 2, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
So people who needed 2 took their 2. So that kind of filled in gaps too. So there's a lot of things kind of moving and shifting. I am not worried about anything falling apart.
But are you, like, as a mom, did you want to design, were you a part of the design process of the after school program? Like what will be in it?
Yes. And a lot of that came from the vendor outreach we did last winter to figure out, well, what can we, what would we like to see? What do other past parents? That's one of the questions we asked. What would you like to see? We gave them all sorts of choices about, home ec and STEM, et cetera. I think traditionally it's been sports, right? Which is great. My kid loves sports, but we really wanted to try and see how we could, put a capital E on enrichment and make it a little wider. So, and Catherine did that. She really did. So
I wanted to ask you about the Medco program. What do you think? How does this support them? Because I'm sure Boston parents are also working, and they might need aftercare too. Are they opting for it?
I don't have the answer to that question because I don't have access to that data.
Oh, okay.
I don't have access to the data about who exactly is signed up.
Mhm.
All I know is the numbers.
But was there anybody who connected you with Medco side of the school?
No.
No. Okay. So now we are moving on to when Karen makes sure that all the moms have time in their hand and they can go back to work. And what is she doing now?
So through the process of working on PASS, it's interesting because at the beginning I didn't realize this crossover with mental health.
Mental health.
But at the same time I'm doing this, I'm also just reading article after article and book after book. And by the way, I don't read books, but I read like 9 in like 6 months. I mean, partially I think because I had some time on my hands, but also because I'm just all in on this topic. And really about like what is happening in the world and what has happened over the last decade to cause this shift, this antisocial shift in our society, and the disconnect and the sadness and the anxiety and the depression.
Yeah.
And it's many things affecting it.
Did pandemic has a huge chunk to it?
It did impact it, but it was happening before. And so I've looked at all that data. It was happening before.
But do you think
it's gotten worse.
It highlighted it more?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think it helped bring it to people's attention who wouldn't have been paying attention now.
True.
And I think one of the biggest challenges is that it's silent, it's invisible, and it's stigmatized, right? So people don't want to admit to it. People don't want to talk about it. And I understand why. There's never been more data about what's making people unhappy. And there's never been more data about what makes people happy. Truly, empirical data, what makes every single human happy that you cannot debate.
Yeah.
And those 4 things are friends, community, meaningful work, and it's called faith, but don't think of faith like religion. Think of faith like you're not the center of the world. Do you believe you're not the center of the world?
I'm sorry. I will sound very vain. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But I was like, yes, I think I have good friends. I think I have a good community, a village that I'm trying to build. And you have to work hard at it.
I want to make that easier.
Oh,
that's where I'm going.
That is so amazing.
So that's for me as I'm putting together the data points about like, oh, what's making people sad? Oh, what makes people happy? Okay, how can we en masse reach people and step them through a graduated process of connecting with people who are like-minded, who have shared interests, who are close by to them, and actually use technology to get them off the tech.
That sounds like a mammoth task.
Yes, it's going to be, but I'm going to do it.
Oh, I am so. I can see that bright light on your face when you speak about it.
Again, it's a funny thing. I'm reading all these things. I'm involved with PASS, and one day I just walked down in my office about 3 months ago, and I took a huge whiteboard and I just wrote it all out, and I was like, and there it is. That is it.
When was that? When did you write that on the whiteboard?
Let's see, what month are we in? October. July.
This year?
Yeah. And then I'm not a mental health professional, but I'm a person in the world who has experienced it. I'm a person who has a lot of deep relationships with people who have experienced it. I've always been interested in psychology. I was a psych major. I have a master's in communication sciences and disorders. But I needed to validate like what I think is going to work and be effective. And that's the key part. This product is going to show measurable effectiveness, right? I need the industry to look at this. I need clinicians and folks who are out there on the front lines to say, yeah, I'd recommend this. Even to somebody who just, has an adjustment disorder, is feeling sad. Maybe they don't have I don't want it to be something people look at as like, this is a mental health platform. No, this is a platform to bring connection and happiness and vitality and get people out of their homes and back into life. And it's data backed and it's measurable. So I went to this conference, mental health marketing conference, met some absolutely incredible people, and started with them and said, hey, you're leaders in your field. What do you think about this concept? And the overwhelming answer I got was yes, yes, yes. And how can we help? And so that's when I really first knew, hey, I'm onto something here. And it's clinically, it follows the right path. So
Karen, I don't want to cut you, but I want the audience to know that do you share healthcare background in some way?
So the master's in communication sciences and disorders made me a speech pathologist. I didn't work with children, though. I worked with adults with brain injuries. So I learned all about the brain and how it works and what drives what. And so I did that for 7 years, a combination at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York and then at Lahey Hospital.
And so you are very keen observer of what's happening around you, that means.
Yes. Yes. For me, it was, I can see this through line. And I think that's one of the things that I've realized about myself is that I'm really good at seeing through lines and seeing what's coming down the path. So now, all of a sudden, right? By the way, the Surgeon General last spring put out an advisory, loneliness epidemic. Oh, yeah. There is a loneliness epidemic, right? And that was critical for this movement. So the Surgeon General last spring put out an advisory, the loneliness epidemic advisory, and in it, he has just pages and pages of data. I mean, it's worse for you, right, than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, than obesity. It has more of a negative effect on your health. It's now the number one premature killer of men. So it is every age, it is every demographic, doesn't matter who you are. In some ways, it affects the wealthy more because the more money you have, the more you can isolate yourself with technology and Uber Eats and delivery and everything else. And so that really was a great thing for the movement, and it's going to be very helpful as I go out and fundraise. And, I already feel so loved, like putting it out there into the world and the number of people who've come and said, how can I help? So
I'm sure, because everybody feels it.
Yes.
Did you ever have this thought that, now everything makes sense?
Yes. Yes.
Was there a moment like...
It's like there's a kaleidoscope and I've been spinning it and suddenly like everything just like locked into place. But I will say that anything I've ever done has been it becomes an extension of me. I don't have much of a gray area. So if I'm going in, I'm going all the way in.
All the way in. All right. This is incredible. So what have you thought of the name of the
It's called Flutter Local.
Flutter Local. And it's going to be an app?
Not going to be an app.
Okay. It's going to be a website where people...
Yeah, it'll be a web app. So it'll be a web-based app. For now, that is what it will be. I might be able to be convinced to make a mobile app out of it, but my biggest concern is that it's one more thing going off in people's pockets when they should be talking to somebody on the subway. So I want to be
But you need to reach people. And in this digital world, you need that. Yeah.
Yeah. So potentially, I want to be very intentional about how this is built. One of the ideas I'm toying with is, do I build in a gamification aspect to it to keep people motivated and involved? But I don't want it to become about the game, and I don't want it to become about those rewards. I want it to be about the reward of interpersonal relationships. And so these are things up for grab now.
I'm so excited and so curious about it. I have 10 different questions coming to my head. Is it for an individual? Is it for a group? Is it a community event, kind of a local? Flutter Local can mean different towns, different, district. I don't know. I mean, there's so many possibilities.
The idea is that as an individual, you can get on the platform. And essentially, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to gather some quick data. How do you feel? What do you need? What can you give?
Yeah.
Because this is a community, so there's got to be a give and a take. And when you come in, there's different spaces you can move into. We have audio-only rooms. We have almost like a virtual reality, but think of like a little avatar, and there's a pool table, and you walk up, and you can just meet somebody. And when you walk up, your cameras kick on. So now we're playing some virtual pool, but we're also looking at each other.
Oh my God, you are going to bring the MarTech, the AI, the VI, all of it together in this, huh?
And then we're going to step them out to, okay, why don't you go meet up with that person?
Wow.
Through and it's a delicate process, right? You're doing a dance. There'll be people will be able to look at their profiles, and it'll kind of say like, hey, this is happening within 5 miles of you. Hey, your friend Peter's going to this, and you guys both have dogs. Like, it's a dog walk. Why don't you sign up and go? So it's this idea of I might meet Peter in a virtual space, and then one day I challenge him to a game of chess, and then the next day I see, I get this prompt that says like, hey, Peter's going to this and wants to know if you want to join. So, and that's with the local aspect of it, which is really important, right? Because if I just open it up to everyone in the world, everyone interacting with each other from Japan, hey, that's great.
Take me.
And maybe we'll get there.
Yeah.
But there's nothing. The number one thing I took away from the mental health marketing conference was that from a clinician, there are 40,000 mental health B2C apps.
Wow.
She will not recommend any. Zero, because they don't get the job done. They deploy the science of mental health, mindfulness, deep breathing, meditation. But what truly heals is the art of healing with human engagement. So you've got to get people back together. And if I just leave them on the tech, all I've done is create another social platform, and that is not what I want to do.
That is amazing. Thank you. Thank you for
My
sharing
pleasure.
that.
Thank you for
And
having
thank you
me.
for coming.
Of course.
So excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamini.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Isn't this amazing how women are empowering societies around them, understanding what is holding them, and facing it head on? I think I'm fangirling Karen big time. And in this episode, I acted less of a host, but more of a parent and a woman whose career hurdles matched the problem she tried solving. Please don't forget to follow Betone Fitness Wayland on their socials and connect with them with your fitness queries. Karen has already launched her new company, and it's not called Flutter Local. It's a different name. Find Karen Kelly on LinkedIn or Google her to know more. Don't forget to read the show notes and get all the details. Keep listening and stay tuned for the next one. This is Yamini, your host, and you were listening to Women of Wayland, the podcast, where we bring you local, incredible women's stories.